is there anything that keeps coming up? Is there a thread beside the fact that we're experiencing folks who are in who identify as women, who are going through trials of love, right? And what those expressions of love may look like or not look like. What are some of the threads that are coming up?
I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Crystal.
Okay. I think that the thread for me is angst. There's angst in each story that in the beginning of the book, I think it was more about coming to terms. The characters were coming to terms with their feelings and their attractions for other women. And I think tonight's set of stories, the women characters have accepted their attractions for other women, but there's still that angst. There's still that sense of discovery, I find. And I find these stories to be darker than the ones in the beginning of the book, the ones we talked about last week. So we had wondered last week if we would see violence, if we would see blood, and we're seeing that in these stories.
Absolutely. And hearing you speak aloud, say that aloud, connects the dots of like, in those earlier stories, we maybe have younger characters or
yes,
understanding love in a certain way. Of course, it gets heavier the more we get into it, right? And the more we grow up. And thank you.
Thank you.
I want to pick up on that thread about the angst and the progression of time. I just celebrated a really big birthday. And so the story that stood out for me in this was the Hermetic Dramaturge.
Yes.
And it's on page 85, where she says, I find myself thinking about the metaphysics of progress of our body's journey. So in 65, that was like first and foremost on my mind, to think about how far I've come, the realization that I may not have all that much further to go, but also being comfortable with being characterized, because when I have an older uncle who's 95, and so when I'm in his presence, I'm still a baby to him. So, that just really stood out for me.
Thank you for sharing that, and happy birthday, Linda. I love a Capricorn birthday. Happy birthday.
Yes.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yes.
Now, you said it was a big birthday, so do you mind telling us which one or no?
Oh, 65.
Oh, nice. You look good.
I'm not one of those people. I had a good friend who passed away, who didn't see her 50th birthday. And so I am not shy in feeling very honored to still be here. And so it's not something that I hide. Absolutely. Because not everybody gets to be here.
You're right.
Right.
Spoken like a goat. Love it.
Yeah, I felt, like an underlying sadness, in these stories. It's like, maybe part of it's frustration that they can't really be out, or I'm not exactly sure what it is, but there's like despondency or
yes.
I agree. It all started out like fun and games. I'm reading the audiobook for last week. The first story, she was a virgin and she lost her virginity, and then the story of the next door neighbor who they were trying to figure out that she was gay, but they said she had a sickness. Like, it was all very innocent. And this second part has become, very heavy. I don't know if I'm at the right part, but, she was living with the woman, but she can't tell anybody. And then she brings somebody home, and it's very, it feels a little depressing, a little sad. And,
Yeah.
It has a different energy.
Mhm.
And with that, I don't know, I think I'm enjoying the writing a little more. It's progressing for me because I don't know. I think the author is still very, very funny. In spite of all of those undertones, I still think there's a wit and there's a cleverness to the characters and how they're navigating what we could interpret as a difficult time or a depression or a combination of many things, you know.
What I think what I like the beginning is, I don't know. I don't know what's like to be a, a gay woman but I felt like the stories were like very light, and I don't know, it just kind of helped me understand that in a way that it didn't have all that other stuff. It just felt like more natural, I really like the story about losing her virginity. I thought it was, with the boy, but she really liked the girl. That's I don't know. That story really touched me in a way, and I mean, I don't know. It really made it clear to me. It gave me a lot of empathy. So these, that lightness. Whereas this is, I don't know. This is becoming a little more, almost judgmental about being, gay. I don't know if anybody else felt like that, but
Agree, Rachel. I don't know. I think I like that word about judgmental, because I don't know if I'm reading it the same way you are, but the last story, I kind of like the last story, Como te extraño, Clara, because it felt that way. It felt like she was being judged, but she was judging herself because she was in love. She was married and had a husband and a son, but she was in love with a woman. And then it wasn't until that accident that she had that kind of brought it all together. And I don't know, before the accident, I was like, okay, I don't know if she's going to leave her husband and her whole life just to be with this woman. And I was kind of doubting the whole thing. I was kind of feeling like I was in the story. But then towards the end, and she was in the hospital, and she just kept calling her name, the woman's name. And then her husband, I guess, figured it out, like looked at her text messages or whatever. It just felt real. It just, it just felt like that's someone's life for real. And you're living, I don't know if you want to call it like a secret life, but you are living a secret life. You are married to the world, to a man, but that's not what you want. You really want to be with this woman. So I don't know. I really like that story. I think that happens even in straight relationships, not only gay relationships. So that was my story of choice. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
To piggyback off of what you said, I think in the beginning, I think society, I don't know about Brazilian society, but somebody like young women are given more leeway to have female relationships. But then as you get older and marriage and children come in, there's less acceptance of that. So in the beginning when she lost her virginity, but she's going with the girl, I mean, that's not as unacceptable to society as when you get older and you're living with a woman. You choose a woman chooses a woman, or a man chooses a man. That's going to punt. Yeah.
One thing I caught in the story we're talking about now is that she had already had a relationship with a woman, Leticia. And so the way I read that short story was that she had this experience with a woman when she was younger. The woman freaked out, couldn't handle it, and a man came along And she chose to go the straight way because that's the context, that's the environment. And then this other young woman comes into her life years later. She already has a child. And it's like, wait a second, this is who I am. I do love women. And so I thought that was an important part, that she was rediscovering herself and making a choice to be who she was, to be authentic, and struggling with that.
I also felt anger at some of these stories, like the one that had to pretend he was the cousin. And it was like, really, you know, I felt angry when about even the woman that was married, and she was just kind of lying to her husband. I mean, it would have been better if she just had came out and said, look, you know, I'm not feeling this. He had to kind of find out as opposed to her revealing herself. Also in the story, there was another one where I couldn't get what was going on with the whole, I guess, S&M kind of thing. I didn't know what was going on in the middle, but I was kind of, I got kind of lost. I didn't know. It was like, what's going on? Because the story wasn't written, I don't think, that well. So it was like, okay. And then the one where someone found their partner having sex with somebody else, I was like, so I was seeing myself angry throughout this whole kind of story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah,
I
that
think
one.
there's,
No, you go, Sharon.
I think there's a lot of messiness that we're seeing in this this portion of the book. There's a lot of messiness, and as Anais said about the women, it's like I haven't read that last story that we're supposed to be discussing tonight, but it seems like that woman was just so completely unfulfilled. The one that was married and had a child already and decided that she'd rather be with the woman. So I think that these stories, the angst comes from being unfulfilled. And the young lady who just spoke and mentioned the story about my cousins in town, that couple, the main character, she was uncomfortable being in the lesbian relationship, but she said her partner didn't have a problem at all. So I think that sometimes we impose limits on our own selves and we can't break free of them. And that's what it seemed to be with that particular young lady.
Yeah, I don't think she was uncomfortable in the relationship as much as she was uncomfortable with people knowing about it.
Right, that's what I mean.
Okay, which is something a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe what had been mentioned earlier is that that's what's happening here, that the characters are we now see characters that are not necessarily children. People, you know, as adults, we tend to weigh our own things against ourselves, right? Like it's harder. So we're now seeing the projections and the impositions that happen. And we've all been in love, regardless of identity, as someone had said last week. Like, we all can relate to those feelings.
Right.
And we see that complexity a little bit more. I would say even when we go back to Hermetic dramaturge, that, you know, when we talk about not being fulfilled, I think that would be a character that's the most unfulfilled. That's why this person keeps emailing, almost rambling, and trying to share ideology, and playing mind games, a lot of gaslighting, and it's a lot. You know, you see all of that, and those are all projections. I mean, all have been on the other end of an email like that, or have been sort of spewing sort of projections onto others, right? Like, we know what that is. I love that story because I just love how the end, they're muted, right? And we understand that the other person chose to stop this toxic projection. I just want to name that that's definitely going on, and y'all are right on. What is it? The nail on the donkey? No, the head on
the nail on it. Pin the tail on the donkey.
The tail on the donkey. The head on the, yeah, I'm playing like children's game. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? You guys are, folks are really naming these common threads of the stories are getting a little more complicated. And I never realized that until we were saying it aloud. I think that's very beautiful that the author's kind of able to allow us to grow up a little bit, right? In the process of getting older.
I'm
Did
so
you?
surprised that you say that's your favorite story so far.
I mean, no, okay, let me
Or you
revise.
mean from tonight's batch?
Just from tonight's batch, and it's not my favorite necessarily. I just really admire the writing and the prose of that they told the story
Yeah.
via email as opposed,
Okay.
it's different. Like,
Okay.
there's others.
Okay.
I thought that made this story a little unbelievable, that these were just basically 2 emails or 3 emails. They must have been like some hella long email. And I just felt like maybe if they had broken them up into even more emails, it would have been, and again, I'm listening to it, so maybe the presentation on the page looks different than when you consume it through an audiobook. But it took me a while to realize that this was an email correspondence.
Mhm.
Just because when they said it, I was like, how long would that email have been?
Right.
I mean, people write long emails. I get
Oh, yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But it almost felt like it should have, instead of putting it in the email context, I don't know. Maybe she's talking to a therapist. Maybe she's just talking to someone, like this sort of unknown person. And I'm rewriting the story, and I shouldn't do that.
No, but
But
I understand.
just
I
thinking of
understand.
this as an email, as think back and forth on email. I was like, wow.
Right. Well, what I will name for you is that in the book, you have to understand it. Reading an email, that sort of pace and intensity is different than listening to your email. Or
Yeah.
listening to this now. So I can see why the monologue-esque sort of thing would have fit with the audiobook.
Mhm.
And I think the author, this is an assumption, I'm assuming, the author's trying to show the violence of like how much of an imposition and how much this other person is imposing themselves and
Yeah.
not really having a conversation anymore. Like I think we're meant to feel that something is wrong with this person. I don't know if folks agree with that, but
No, I mean, she did sleep with her and
Yeah,
kind of that one, right? I mean, that one night and never really called her back. I mean, I don't know. Is this the right story that we're talking about?
no, I don't think so. This is a story. This in the email exchanges, they
That's
did
her
have a
Natalia, yeah.
relationship, and now they're with she's with someone else, and the
Okay,
other
got
person is just talking about their life, and
Okay.
the person's asking, "Hey, are you okay?" or trying to ask like engaging questions, and there's no engagement. It's just like spewing ideology and talking about the earth and the body and long-winded.
I think I agree with Ron with the whole long, drawn out emails and what you just said about there's no feedback. I feel like the girl that was writing the emails, the long, drawn out emails, she was like, it was a bit much.
I think
I
so
thought
too.
it was just like over the top. Like, okay, what are you saying? What, like in my mind, I was reading it and I'm thinking, okay, well, if I'm talking to a lover and they're sending me this email, I'm gonna be like, really? Okay, here we go. Delete. That's what I'm gonna do because I don't have time for this. Like, talk to me. What are you talking about? Are we talking about the earth or we're talking about my love? Like, what do you want to hear? I mean, I want to help you, right? And it looked like, I think M, or I'm not exactly sure.
Anna.
What's her name? The girl that she was writing to,
Anna.
and
No.
she looked like she wanted to help her,
Yes.
but it didn't. It almost seemed like I want help. I don't want help. I want to talk about something else, and I'm not clear. So to me, I didn't feel like, one, it was a very good communication, and two, this is not the type of conversation we should be having via email.
Right.
I'm very serious about you. It seems like you're suicidal. I have no idea what's going on. I want to help you. I want to see you. And she did say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And then
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. I'm saying like I was just gonna affirm you. Keep going.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't really like it too much.
Me
I mean,
either.
I went through the whole thing for sure. but I didn't like it because I tried to put myself in this situation,
Mhm.
and I said, this is not for me. I mean, what are you saying to me? Like that, like
Yeah.
literally my response to her messages were, what do you want to say? And
Yeah,
I think that I probably would have did that.
did that. But when I hear you say that, Barbara, I feel like, I don't know, I thought her muting her, that was the culmination of those feelings. Like, what
Right.
are you doing? This is so frustrating that you're muted.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to hear this anymore.
I do have a question for anyone that knows the answer. Why did she keep saying nausea? Why did she, is that what she felt? I don't know what
Right.
that.
Because she said that she was waking up and she was feeling nauseousness, but at the
Oh.
same time she was denying the possibility of pregnancy.
Okay, but
But the
every
nauseousness was
right?
She was pretty sure she
continuous.
wasn't pregnant,
Uh-huh.
just because of time, the amount of time that had passed.
Right.
She didn't explain the nausea, did she?
So that was
I
just
think
like
so.
her
I think it
saying,
was her projection of her, you know, because then when Anna tries to change it to something else, she's like, I didn't, you know, very I think aggressively is like, I didn't like your thing, I'm changing it back to nausea. And it's kind of like, okay, so you want to stay in the narrative of how you feel, like as opposed to us then moving on and being in some other kind of communication, you want to maintain this. And then I think I received it as like, oh, that's why I have to stop talking to this person, you know. But no, y'all are right. It definitely was drawn out.
I had very conflicted feelings about this short story. I didn't like other people. I didn't like the character, and I think I was struck by. I kept thinking I didn't get in the beginning the dramaturg, which I guess I realized was that she was a playwright. You know, so then I realized, oh, she must have been a very successful playwright, or she came from a lot of money because she was traveling all over the world.
I know.
And I mean, I wrote down like all the countries that first she went to this and this and this and this country, and then she came back, and then she went to this and this and this and this country, and then she came back. And at the end, she said she was taking off for Germany, and then she'd come back. So she felt like a very indulged, like upper class person in Brazil, and so I didn't have a lot of sympathy for her. But then I was conflicted because the writing in this particular short story I found very poetic, and I thought she's really a good writer, you know, and I think she's being very provocative with the characters that she's creating, the storylines she's developing. It's kind of like sometimes it's hard to really get grounded in her in the beauty of her writing, because the story she's telling is so ugly. So there's this beauty in the writing, but then the story is so ugly or it turns you off. And so that was a very conflicted reaction I had to this.
Absolutely. On page 95, she's like, she's coming for her. She's coming for her whole neck. She's calling her a sad little person, but she's saying it really beautifully, right? She's like, you've always been melancholic, poetic, and a little sad too, but a lovely kind of sad. The sadness of the moon dappled between the blossoms of an orange tree. Like, similarly to Barbara, I would have been like, what? Like, you ain't talking to me. You're not talking to me like this, you know, and probably would have tried to shut that down. So that's why I felt like it was gaslighting. I think I named that before. Like, it's a lot of, it's abusive. I think that's what, it's a different kind of violence I think we were able to see in that email.
Yeah, another word is passive aggressive. She is. I don't think she's in touch with her feelings. You know? And so in order to, try to communicate, she's emailing, but she's not saying it. She's not really saying, I feel such and such. Absolutely. I love such and such. I like, she's not getting down to, any true feelings. And then she gets aggressive, because maybe she feels bad about what she's feeling, but she can't express. And maybe that the other woman is sympathetic towards her, So she's really very mixed up.
Absolutely.
She's hiding behind her talent. She's saying a lot, that old saying, you know, talking loud and saying nothing. And she's using her words as a shield. And she thinks she's sharing, but she's not really giving us anything.
Absolutely.
It does take a level of bravery on the writer's part to write a monologue that is this long, you know, and commit to it, and don't, you know, don't kind of follow our criticism, because she does write well, and you don't often see monologues that are that long. Again, I'm listening to the audiobook. So to write it and to still keep everyone in, she kept me engaged in it. It was just the length of it that seemed, it didn't seem logical, but the writing talent is definitely there.
Absolutely. I thought it was beautiful. I thought, or just some of the ways. Yeah, it's like that weird, wow, her self-deprecation sounds very beautiful.
I was thinking that what Ron just said, maybe Natalia intended for us to want to feel this way about this story. Yep. So maybe if she heard me talking about how frustrated I was listening to the story, then she probably would say, aha, I got you. That's exactly where I wanted you. I wanted you to feel like frustrated. Like, really? What are you talking about? So maybe she did her job with that story.
Yes, I agree. I think that's maybe why it stands out to me. Not as comfortable. What's a story that folks really like?
It's almost like when you have an actor and you hate him, and you're like, I just hate this guy. I hate this guy. I don't even want to watch this movie. I hate it. But then he looks and he's like, I did my job. Like, you hated me, and that was my acting. Right. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, that maybe that's what it was. Hey, if it was fantastic, she did
like
her
Terrence
job.
Howard. Like Terrence Howard, he plays everybody. You're like, oh my goodness, not him again. But then you love it.
But then you want to see more.
Right. Or Keith. What's his man's name? Keith David. He was in Greenleaf. He plays the pastor. Y'all know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's an OG.
Keith David.
Keith David. Every time I'm like, oh no, not again.
I have a question. What is como te extraño? What does that mean?
How I miss you.
Oh, okay, all right. I got the como and I got the te, but I get the other part. Thank you.
Oh, I miss you. Yeah.
I wanted to say another thing about this, the one we were just talking about, which is I also thought it was really interesting that she introduced this whole story about the experience with the couple and the 3-month relationship she had with them, and the woman falling in love with her, and the whole thing. I mean, it was like a whole other short story. You know, I thought it was like that technique. It was interesting. Like, here are these emails, and it's all about, you know, some philosophical, you know, kind of, one could say, maybe say bullshit that she was like telling her old friend. And then there's this occasion, and then she tells a whole other story that, you know, I thought that was really interesting. And the fact that she brought out the relationship between the two women, and that that they fell in love, and the conflict again of the woman who was with her Russian husband, or, you know, partner, and her. I just thought that was very interesting about them trying to get her pregnant, and it's like a whole other short story.
Yeah, and she told those two stories differently as well. She, like, in the first story, she describes it in the setting of a play. In the second story, she names what happens to the characters. Like, she actually is telling two stories very differently on top of the emails as well. As thank you for naming that.
Yeah.
And
If
that's,
y'all want to see that in the book, it's page 98 and 99. Like literally one story's here and the other one is here.
and that story was equally tragic
Mm.
because of the husband trying to blackmail, and she says blackmail the wife into having children, at least a child, or he will leave her. So it felt like a separate story, like
Yeah.
you said, Anaïs.
Can I ask a question that shows how naive I am and how young I am? There's a reference to like Yasmina Reza, who I know who that is a playwright. And it's like, oh, Yasmina Reza already wrote this story and Roman Polanski's making it a movie or something like that. Does anyone know, is that true? Like is that a real thing that happened? Is there a film that came out?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. But I was like, damn, Roman Polanski, what movie is that? Like trying to figure.
Also, what year is that? I mean, Roman Polanski hasn't been making movies in America for a really long time.
Right.
But that said, this could have been anywhere. I think he was making movies in Europe. So
No, I also thank you, because I was like, wait a minute, he can't make movies here. I don't know.
right,
Yeah.
for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
like since the 80s or something like that. Which also begs the question, when is this short story set? Like in what time is it set? Does it say? Like, I'm not familiar with the playwright. Like, is she young, older?
She's older from what I know,
Mhm.
and she's also written books. I've only read her books, actually. I don't think I know her plays, but I know she's a playwright, and she does a lot of satire.
I think that's a theme for the book club. We're always like trying to figure out like when the book was written, like different times, or we're always like trying to put that together.
Yeah, like what are the references that tell
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Because then I gotta remind myself, well, they're writing emails, so whatever story she's
Right.
referencing
Right.
has to be
Right.
something else.
Mhm.
You know? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I was gonna ask, were there any? I know a couple of folks had shared like these are the stories that I really enjoyed. Even if we did, maybe they were in the first batch, but is there still any story that has clung on to you so far as we're going through this journey? I know that for me, I would actually say no. I feel like I'm taking each story as its own little vignette and moment in time. Like they're staying with me, but I feel like, you're watching a show and you just want to see you want to binge the next 5 episodes. Like that's kind of how I feel about this. But I wonder if anyone feels differently.
I thought that the short story where she is keeping her personal life secret from her colleagues was the saddest. Just the mere fact that you have to live your life in secret,
My cousin sleeping.
takes a lot out of you. What's that?
That's the one with the cousin.
That takes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right, exactly. That kind of life takes a lot out of you, trying to live a somewhat secret life. And it also, it can affect, even though the partner handles it relatively well when she comes out the shower and the woman lies and says, oh, that's my cousin. And like later on, there's a reference where she just sort of laughs it off. But I don't know if I could laugh that off,
No, I agree with you, Ron. That story really affected me, and I don't know why.
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't know why. That story really affected me, and I was like just so hurt for the partner. And even she did say at the end, though, she did say to her like, we got to figure something out with this. Yeah, she did kind of let her know like this is. And even like they seemed like so in love, and she was saying, oh, the black hair and our black hair was, in the shower because we both have black. I don't know. I felt like it sounded so romantic, and so you could tell that she loved her partner, and and that was her family. But I think even when she said too that she got sick and she wanted to stay at her parents' house. And her partner got mad, and I don't know why this story is bothering me. I don't know. It did really affect me in a way. You know, but I don't know why.
I just feel like relationships take enough energy in the best of times, and to try to have a relationship where you're not even sort of openly honest about it, regardless of whether it is preference, race, you know, whatever it kind of fits into, the mere fact that you're trying to hide your partner from the rest of the world, really. Because I think she mentions, like, you know, the only time they have is like taking walks, taking the dog for a walk or something like that. So it's kind of crazy.
The imaginary dog.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say
Oh,
it's like
right,
Right,
right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that was kind of crazy.
Yeah. Then the expansion that people have to put themselves in order just to love, right? And just to show up. And last week we were talking about how I forgot what prompted this understanding, but last week we mentioned how people would have to get married, and something that someone had referenced even today. You'd have to get married and live the straight life and move in that way, because it's not only whatever internal choices, but the societal impact and pressure of those choices, because we live in a hetero world, or a hetero society, or however you want to stir the soup. You know what I mean? Like that is what it is. And I think naming, of course, this is what queer people have, or a queer, as Stephanie had mentioned last week, queer political understanding. This is what people who aren't straight have to understand in order to try to understand love. And naming that, even in that, we're focusing on like Black body in that, right? It's already so often, as Ron mentioned, it's so difficult being in love. And we're naming it's difficult to be Black and in a relationship and in love. And then to have to hide it, to be Black in a relationship and love. You're trying to reach this freedom and still sort of, you can't, right? You're being held back. Y'all are really on point. We need a show.
Paula, so do you, and I don't know if this is the case, but you're identifying the characters as Black.
I'm not the character. I feel like those characters in that story were trying to identify as Black. I know not all Brazilians are Black people, but and Brazilian has the most Black people.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you know, if that's how you are reading the stories, because sometimes, like when we were reading Saeed Jones, and I was like, unless they say so, everybody is white. But now you're saying, you could be right.
Well, I think when I think of Brazil, I don't know, I make this, and in this story, I think someone had mentioned, they talk about Blackness in a particular expression in a way through the hair. So I was just like, okay. And yeah, what came to mind when I started to read the stories, because when I think of Brazil in a political context, I understand it to be, we have the most Black people in a continent, you know, in Brazil. So understanding that and knowing the way homosexuality is, or homophobia is what I should name, is embedded throughout Brazilian culture on a government level, and like sort of the resistance that it takes to even write this kind of book. I think I come in that way, and then someone has to tell me, hey, all the characters are white or something like that in order for me to go, oh, okay.
I think that would be a good question to ask Natalia when we, have that conversation with her. My understanding of Brazil is that historically, the upper class, all of the telenovelas, all the news shows, the anchors, all white, all the politicians, all white. And
sounds like the United States.
but for a country, no, in the United States, Black people are 12% of the population. As Paula says, in Brazil, 80% of the population are Black.
Right.
So there's, historically a really huge gap between, poor Black people and the upper classes and the ruling class all being white. But there is an interesting thing that happened in Brazil in the last 25 years. There was a development of a middle class. and I think that changed things. And I would like to find out from Natalia, like, she does have a at least one of the characters, one or two. I don't know if it's the same short story. The one where the woman gets in the accident, she describes her face as black. And there's one, I don't know if it's the same story, where she looks at her thighs and her thighs are black. So there's at least in one or two stories where she makes a specific reference to the person being black. And I would just be really interested. I mean, I assume there was a creation of a Black middle class, and that came out of the poor Black community. I mean, you know, that poor people were given an opportunity to, you know, have something and to move into a middle class.
Yeah,
So
expand the tax bracket, in a
yeah,
sense.
so I'd be very interesting to hear from her, to get some feedback from her about that process and who she's writing, who she's representing in her work.
Yeah, I think race in Brazil is even more complicated than it is here. It's sort of like South Africa, but South Africa does it a different way. But you know, like there's this joke where sort of like a joke where this person was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm white," and then somebody says, "Well, what was your grandmother?" And you know, so there's a lot of denial of the Africanness of white people in Brazil too. You know, so it's complicated.
Barbara.
Mhm.
You
I
have a
was looking
question?
at her picture, and I was looking at her picture, but I can't really tell, you know, anything about her racially. So I don't know.
But were you asking Barbara something? No.
I thought she was waiting to ask a question.
Um,
Probably not.
I wasn't gonna ask a question. I was gonna state my opinion as far as like the whole race is concerned. When reading this story, I'm not thinking about black, white. I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. I'm thinking about the issues at hand. And because the author is Brazilian, I'm thinking she uses a lot of Brazilian terms, names, places. I'm thinking she's talking about Brazilians. I'm not trying to say, oh, okay, well, she's talking about Black people. She's talking about this, because Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Peruvians, any kind of Spanish culture that you can think of, we all have different colors, right? So we have the blackest black, dark, dark, dark color. I'm talking about complexion. And then we have the very lightest one that they're crossing the street and you would never think at all that they're black, let's say, right? So me personally, when I'm reading this story, I'm not identifying it with any type of culture, race, ethnicity. I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. I'm just thinking, wow, these are stories of, and I'm also not thinking of just queer women. I'm not. I'm thinking of it as these are stories of straight women, queer women. These are stories that happen to just women in general. Just, this is something that can happen to all of us, even the men, obviously, because men are involved in these stories. But this is how I feel when I'm talking about it. Even when I was thinking about the last story, I was thinking about myself in the story. How would I feel about this? How would I feel if I'm married and I have a child and I'm in love with a woman? This is how I would feel. So I'm taking it in as just a normal generalized thing that can happen to any of us. Yes, I know that we're talking specifically about queer women in this story, and that's the way she's identifying it. However, stories that she's saying they're not all saying, yes, I'm queer, right? Like they're saying, wow, I'm married, but I love this woman. How does she know yet? Maybe she doesn't know she's queer yet. Maybe she hasn't put that title on herself yet. She's experimenting, like even the younger girls that kind of don't like the boys and they like this. They're just kind of, working their way around themselves. And I don't know, that's how my input is about the story, the stories that we've read and the book within itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, because what you're naming is that is how good this writing is, right? Like that is how relatable and understanding and accessible the author is making whatever sort of identities in which the characters are in, regardless of how you move in your identity, there's a reflection, right? You're able to take something away from it. Barbara, I hope I'm naming, that's what you're saying, and sort of being in the fluidity of all those things. And as Ron named before, it's just sort of also putting yourself in shoes that maybe are bigger than the ones that we know. Like, yeah, I've had the feeling where I've had to not be my full self in something, trying to imagine now having to have society tell me in any way that I can't be in love with this person, just that understanding and taking us somewhere else because we can access the stories. And therefore, also naming like, oh, wow, yeah, I've never been put in that kind of situation before. That's, that's something different. That's something to consider. So as
I gotta go. So good night, everybody. Have a good week.
All right, Kagiso.
Good night.
Okay. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Night.
Yeah. So it's naming all those things. Again, I think I just look at things in the scope of, if I were there, what would it look like for me in my body and whatever identities I am in, even if I feel the way or not, like if I were in Brazil at this time, what would it be to walk in those shoes in that way, as opposed to how I walk the earth now, right? Which is, I think the author really puts us there. So I can't wait for her to hear all of this.
She's a good writer. She makes things very vivid and again I was reading like the beginning stories, but even that the little girl and the woman, they found out she was gay and she was trying to explain it to her, and she showed her like the two Barbies and the bear. I don't know, I just thought I thought that was like so touching. She was like, okay, so if you're like men, it's you and the bear. If you like women, and again I thought it was realistic. And it just made me, again, I think even like Barbara said, like your own experiences with, sexuality and, figuring things out. And, it helped me to really understand. I mean, I don't know if that's the author's purpose, and I don't want to say anything like, now I understand, what it means to be gay. So I don't want to say, I don't want any, that's not what I'm saying, but it is explaining more things to me, or that, that.
Yeah, that makes 100% sense. I don't think you're saying what you said before. I think you're naming like you're
Right.
saying, I know what it is, similar to Barbara, similar to what we've said in the past. And I know I'm very adamant about, like, I know y'all are like, listen, Paula, we all relate. And I'm like, no, y'all, we don't, right? And I know like, that's sort of the underlying, I don't want to say tension, but that's the conversation we've been having as the book has started. Not that we're not on the same page, but I know that y'all are trying to allow me to see that space too. And I thank you for that, because it is true. I see myself in these stories, and hearing y'all see yourselves is a very human experience, And what you're naming is like, I'm not saying that I know what it is to be in that identity. What I'm saying is, because I have a relationship to that understanding, I know what it feels to feel a certain way, then I can only imagine what it would then be in those other identities. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's Natalia's purpose, but any sort of radical writing, as we know, does that, right? Think about when you read Audrey, think about when you read Tony, think about when you read Willie Perdomo, think about when you read James Baldwin. Regardless, they're naming a very clear political concept, right? And you're still shifting with it. It's, you know, and I think Natalia is doing that really well. I also just put her in that bucket with all those big, great writers. So I really can't wait to meet her now.
Oh, she's good. She's good.
Mhm.
She's got something.
Do
I
you
think so.
do you think it's possible that the writer punished the queer character by putting her in an accident, and that's how we discover, or that's how her family discovers that she is gay? It's
Why would you use
through,
punish? I'm just curious. What's punish?
it's through that almost life-threatening car accident that we discover, or that her family discovers. Now, I wouldn't say I would believe this more if the writer herself was not queer, or if this was a man writing this same short story. But as a vehicle to move along a story, she could have taken many paths, but she puts the queer woman in this accident that almost kills her. And it's almost like, you see, this is what you get for being queer in my short story. That, you
I
know,
agree.
that there's some action that is taken against you that is, you know, out of the norm, that traffic accident. And through that accident is how how your family discovers your I don't want to say true identity, but your queer identity.
I'm not sure if I would, if I feel comfortable with it being a punishment,
Yeah.
you know, because then that just kind of feeds into there's something wrong, you know, with being queer.
But hang on, I'm gonna let you finish, Anais. In the context of this story, there is something wrong with being queer. That now her husband finds out, and that's gonna take a path. If she seems as though she's sleeping with students, which is a whole other issue.
Right.
This will come out now because of this accident, you know, because of this traumatic incident that happens.
But is it queerness or is it her dishonesty? Is it her ability to not fully show up and be herself?
Right.
You know, it may be homophobic to think queerness is the reason why, as opposed to she can't be herself. You know, I don't know.
No, I mean, I like what I was just going to say, I like what how you picked up, Ron, how you picked up on why an accident. Like that is really dramatic. And I like how you picked up on
it's
that.
Almost like it's a life-threatening accident she was in.
And I think where I went with it was that that this woman, like you know, it could have been in some of the other ones where somebody, you know, walked in on them, you know, like, oh, my husband is out for lunch every, you know, Tuesday, and my son is somewhere else, and then the husband comes home and he finds out. Like that's in, you know, the other story is like that. No, I think you picked up on something, that she chooses to use that vehicle of the car accident, and that she almost dies. And it's for me, it's almost like this is the wake up call that she got to to have to come to terms with her, or who she was authentically. Like she had to almost die to be challenged, to be pushed. Like they were together for 1 year and 8 months. That's a long time. It wasn't 2 months. It wasn't 6 months. At 1 year and 8 months, they had been in this relationship. And it's almost like that's what she needed to happen to her, like to be able to make that move. Like she wasn't making it.
Right. And she was in relationships before this relationship also. You know, so she's been living this life for quite a, I mean, I'm gonna assume for quite a while,
Yeah, because the
where
son
she's
is
having secret
yeah,
relationships.
the son is old.
Right.
You know, he's
Right.
older. The boy is older.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
on his cell phone. He's on Instagram. He's
Yeah.
like a, you know, young teenager or something, or a teenager.
yeah.
That's how I read it. Like this was a real life and death decision that she had to make.
Yeah.
Was she going to leave that life? It wasn't just the husband. It was the life that she had built
Mhm.
with through him
Yeah.
and with him. Was she going to give that all up? She was in such a dilemma. Like, is she going to give all of that up for this, to be who she is and to be with the woman she loves? So that's how I read into why such a dramatic car accident,
Yeah.
because it was that dramatic decision that she had to
Mhm.
make in her life.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like
No, I
trying to
agree.
create a sense of urgency for her. Like you
Yeah.
got to stop this behavior now and show up the way you want to, or not live, right? Like that.
Right.
That it's a life and death decision.
Situation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like not apart from the car, just that dilemma, just that
Mhm.
challenge, just that choice she had to make. It was a life and death choice.
And
Disc-
and she is
disclaimer.
forced into it. Hmm. I'm sorry, Sharon.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and she's forced into this choice. There
Right.
is no trying to get out of it or sneak out of it.
No. My disclaimer, I did not read that story, but
Mhm.
piggybacking off the discussion you're having, it seems to me that the author, by creating a scenario of life and death, that was the final push. That was the thing that made the lady have to make a determination.
Right.
It's like going back to Shakespeare, I believe, who said, "To thine own self be true."
Mhm.
We are all living whatever type of lives we are individually living. It's believed that to get the most from this life, to a basic thing is to thine own self. We just must be true to ourselves. And I think that the author, all these stories we've read so far, the people are just grappling with being true to themselves versus being true to society at large. And they have to, there's that balance, and that's where the conflict and the angst comes from. And so we see them moving through this painful, in a lot of places, self-discovery to end up as a better person, as a more evolved people and characters. So I think that with the car accident, or whatever kind of accident that was in that particular story, that's a common tool for authors to throw in something that's catastrophic, that forces people to make a determination. She may have been waffling back and forth. You said she was in a relationship with a woman for 1 year and 8 months, but she'd been married to a man for much longer, but her heart wasn't in that. And it almost seems as if she married him when the relationship with the woman soured for whatever reason. It's almost as if the man walked in and he was convenient.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times we opt for convenience and appearance instead of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to come to a point where we determine that happiness is better than the convenience or the appearance.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing stuff up in the air.
I'm here with you. I'm here with you.
In general,
See, I'm not one that goes with appearances. I believe to my own self be true. You know, I probably wouldn't have those struggles. But we're all different, and I appreciate that many people, perhaps most people, would waver back and forth and have a lot of difficulty making that determination for themselves. And even though it's a growth, when you get to that other side, you realize how much time and how much energy we've wasted and we've expended trying to please other people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're busy living their life.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that ultimate happiness is the truth, right? That to that
Mhm.
shall be true. You're naming, it's either you conform to something else or you stay true. And if I could share with y'all, from hearing you say that, I think that's why I look at this. Ron, you asked me like, oh, Paula, you see this in a black lens? I don't really know what the question was, but you kind of said it like that.
Mhm.
And I think that's why. I think anytime in my mind, you know, and ride the wave with me, y'all, but anytime in my mind in which like I see in literature or in art or in media or in music, the way that artists can show some sort of perpetuation of that truth, that
Mhm.
divine own self, I think that as in a particular body, that's a huge dismantling of white supremacy, right? Like, and especially how we move and how we see things. So
Exactly.
when characters are able to dismantle that even white characters, but you know, when characters are able to be in that work, my mind then is like, oh, we're showing tools of freedom, we're showing tools of liberation. Like this black body is also trying to get free, you know. So it's
Exactly.
ironic to name. It's not necessary that I'm like, oh, black, we reading this and it's black and it's queer and it's that, but I'm interested in how do we get free, and that's kind of why I come into these lenses, because how many societal labels and impact will be put on a character or put on a person until they're able to break out of all that and just be true, right? And kind of attain that. To me, that is the story, you know.
That's the
And
ultimate.
it's the ultimate, and maybe for my own comfort, I put it through the black and brown lens. But I just wanted to name that as a black brown community. You know what I mean? Like, it's important to me, sort of, that we're in that lens a little bit. You know, like we trying to get free. It's why we share stories. I'm sure it's why Natalia wrote them for us. You know,
Mhm.
and ultimately, if we're not examining that freedom, well, with me at least once a week, what we doing? You know, so I
Wasting
want to know
time.
that. And I thank y'all for always taking it a step further and pushing and challenging me to find the threads and connect the dots. Because
We're challenging each other. Thank
okay,
you.
each other. You know, Nini? Okay, we challenge each other.
Yes.
Watch
I'm
Housewives,
so glad
y'all. We
because
don't.
I had never heard of this author at all or this book, but because of the illustration on the cover, I was like, you know what? Let me just buy the book. My daughter always says, Ma, stop just buying books blindly. Go to the library, or I don't know. There's some of these services now where you can like download a book if you have a library card and blah, blah, blah. I got overdue books, so I can't do that. So it's just easier for me to purchase the book. And I like a book. But yeah, I would have never ran into this author or her work. So I thank you for that. And actually, most of the books that this book club spotlights, they're people I would have never probably have never heard of. And I just especially like that Kem Joy Oku.
Mm.
Well, yeah.
Oh my God, I really liked her works. But yeah, this is good. I'm hoping that I will love it as much as you by the last story anyway.
Yeah.
I don't dislike it, but it hasn't grabbed me.
You know, Sharon, I did think, I'll be honest, I thought it was going to be a little more, you know, and I don't know, maybe I thought it was going to be like a little more sexual. Like I was definitely like, I don't know what I'm revealing, but I thought it was going to be more of like love stories. Like
I thought it was love. Yeah. I
want a little more romance. Like,
this is like a big basket of mess. It's just
that's love,
on their
though.
way to
I think
self-discovery.
that's love.
I'm not taking anything from the author. It's not at all like what I thought it would be.
Right. I thought it was gonna be like kissing and, you know, love,
some
Amora.
Tenderness, some this.
Yeah, I don't want to hear about the car accident and I'm good. I I mean, I don't know.
And this story with these emails, that's like however many pages of just word salad. It's just like, and I consider myself to be intelligent, but I'm like, what the hell is this? What is this? Like there's no rhyme or reason to that particular story for me. So when I encounter things such as that, I put the fault on my own intellect. So I would like to come back to that in like 2 or 3 years and read it again to see if my perspective.
Weeks.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna work on it, but I'll probably just be looking at the author because but I want to get to the place of Paula. I want to love it. I want to be delighted by it, but
I'm delighted. I'm gonna name that. And the author's coming.
Yeah, that's what I want to be.
Now you got me saying things like I don't love it. I don't want to say that, but
okay. But you're delighted. See,
I'm delighted by the
delighted.
Yeah, I'm delighted by the ways in which I've never had to really see myself all the way in those ways. So, and
okay. My goal is to be delighted by the time Natalia joins us.
And I think it's because y'all delight me, so therefore it brings delight to the stories and being able to read and understand.
Well, we appreciate you.
Oh, I love y'all. And something that Ron named, as y'all were all like, this is not, and Ron is like, that's love. And I think I'm kind of like on that page too. Like
that's all it ever looks like.
A big old kind of mess. Nah.
Yeah, that's.
I need some massages. I don't know. Maybe I'm going through something. I don't know what's going on.
Rachel, even if you get massages early on, sooner or later, the massages are going to be less and less. The yelling.
Yeah, but you're going to have some massaging.
I'm not down on love or anything like that, but it's just, it's the full good and bad.
No, I get it.
There ain't no good and bad though. This is all spotlighting the struggle.
Yeah.
Self-discovery.
Right.
They're doing the work here. There's no reward.
I love that.
Well, for me, the reward's gonna be delight.
Delight, hopefully. If not, I'm gonna turn you in for a reward with the NYPL because apparently you owe them. Listen, y'all, it's 8:23. So,
oh my God.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun.